Well, hello there guys, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I've had some really great response to my first 3 videos, so I just want to say thanks so much for all your support and for tuning in and for all your nice messages. If you're new here, basically it's just me working on my old Beetle, trying to get it back to its former glory, just sort of muddling my way through and taking you guys with me. So this, I think, is the 4th video, and what I'm going to do this week, basically, I'm just going to do, kind of finish up the engine work we've been doing previously. So we're going to do a bit of a tune, I'm going to set the timing and work with the carb a little bit, and I'll talk to you a little bit about sort of ignition timing and distributors and that kind of thing. Yeah, all good stuff. So yeah, let's get started. So yeah, as I said, I'm basically finishing up now some of the work we've done in the previous weeks. So obviously last week we changed the oil and we set some valve timing and changed spark plugs and the rest of it. So coming back this week, I've just checked and it doesn't look like we're dripping any oil, so that's good news. First thing to do today before we sort of run the engine up and stuff like that is just to get it started and get it all warmed up a little bit. So I'm just going to do that now. Bit grumpy this week, didn't want to start straight away, but yeah, it's still running well, so we'll let it warm up and then I'll get back to you and talk about what we're going to do today. Okay, so the car's kind of warmed up and running a bit better now. Basically, I'll give you a demonstration of what the issue was, what I'm trying to hunt down here is. So when I hit the accelerator, you can hear there's a bit of a flat spot. So that's what happens when, as soon as you hit the gas, basically, the engine stumbles for a little bit before it picks up. I'll show you again. It almost died that time. As you can imagine, that's pretty annoying when you're sat at a traffic light and it goes green, you want to hit the gas and it dies. You have to kind of pump the throttle to get it going. So that's known as a flat spot, and there's a few things we can do to kind of hunt that down and get rid of it. And I'll talk you through some of the different methods there are. The truth is it's a little bit inherent for some reason, so we won't be able to eliminate it completely. But there are some tips and tricks that we can go through. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to look at today is ignition timing.
The automobile is a marvelous piece of machinery in many ways. Where the piston is in relation to top dead center when the spark occurs depends on how the timing is set and how the automatic advance retard controls work in response to engine speed and load. It is obvious that the spark should occur at exactly the right time to ignite the fuel-air mixture so that it burns as efficiently as possible. But why should this timing vary? Let's examine what goes on within a cylinder on its power stroke. Well, basically, we're attempting to do 2 things. 1, completely burn the fuel-air mixture inside the cylinder for clean emissions. 2, extract the maximum amount of power from the charge in the cylinder. The time taken to develop maximum pressure from a specific fuel-air charge remains constant. So, we must ignite the mixture early enough to assure that as it burns and expands, it develops its maximum pressure at the point in its downstroke where the designer calculates its maximum efficiency to be. At 1,000 RPM, there is enough time during the power stroke to burn the fuel completely. But the time available from top dead center at, say, 3,000 RPM is 2/3 less than at 1,000 RPM. Therefore, in order to have maximum pressure at the correct time at higher RPM, it's necessary to light the fire earlier or advance the ignition timing. Other combinations of load and speed require different ignition advance settings, and the engine must be capable of adapting to these requirements. We can summarize incorrect timing in two broad categories. Early timing will mean lost power and/or detonation, because the engine is fighting itself. Late timing also means loss of power, because of incomplete combustion, which in turn means emissions of unburned fuel and carbon monoxide. Also, the exhaust valve will open earlier in the combustion cycle, so the gases passed into the manifold will be hotter and will cause valve burning.
All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is something known as static timing, and this is the easiest way to set timing on your Volkswagen. You only need a few tools for this. First thing you'll need is a test light, something like this. You'll need a 10mm and a 10mm socket, and that's about it really. You also might need a 21 or a 19mm just to turn this over. You can do that by hand if you want to. So first thing we do is pop the distributor cap. And just like I've showed you before, we want it pointing at number 1. So I showed you in previous videos how to do that. But we'll just turn the engine over to get to number 1. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to zoom you in slightly. There we go. I'll just point you down. So if you'll remember, I think when we were looking at the valves, I talked about these marks here, these notches in the pulley. So this one, if you remember, on the left-hand side, that's top dead center. And because we're on cylinder 1, we're at top dead center, cylinder number 1. I'll just kick the stand there. So these other two marks on the right, these are your timing marks. So this one is 7.5 degrees, and this one's 10 degrees before top dead center. So basically, if you can imagine, just turn it the other way a sec. So the engine, when it's running, is turning over clockwise. So as it hits there, that's 10 degrees, that's 7.5, and that's top dead center. And these are essentially the marks that you want to time your ignition to. So on some engines it's 7.5, most engines it's 7.5. On the 1200s like this one, it's 10 degrees. So the first thing you want to do is turn the engine so that that mark, 10 degree mark, is lined up with the split in your crankcase, like so. So now you're at 10 degrees before. And the next job you need to do is get your timing light. All you need to do is just hook it up to the negative side of the coil, and that's the side, if you're not sure, that comes from the distributor. You can see the wire coming from the condenser up to the coil there, and you just need to ground out your timing light. I just tend to put it here on the sort of throttle body here. That grounds it out nicely. And then you need to turn your ignition on. So make sure your ignition's turned on. Both lights are on the dash. Right, so you can see that light's on now. So what that means is that this cylinder, cylinder number 1, would currently be firing. So what we need to do is make sure that it's firing at exactly the right point. And the way we actually adjust the timing is by rotating the entire body of the distributor here. So to do that, we just need to loosen this nut here. And that's how you get your 10mm. It's a good idea to have an extension on it because the pulley's kind of in the way a little bit. And I tend to just put a spanner on the other side just to hold the nut because it can slip a little bit. Okay, now you don't need it to be really loose. You don't need to loosen it all the way. You just need to be able to rotate the distributor like this. So you can see that light went out there. Basically what we need to do is rotate the distributor anti-clockwise so that it's just about to light up. There you go. There you go. So it's just lighting up there. So that's how you static time your distributor. Now, if you have a vacuum advanced distributor, so that's the one I was talking about with the can here that goes up to here, that's all you need to do. That's how you set your timing. It's literally that simple. All you need is one of these, which, you know, costs maybe a couple of quid, or you can just make one with a light bulb and a bit of wire. Yeah, dead easy. However, I don't have one of those. I've got the 009. Now, this is, if you've got a 009, this is a good method to kind of set like a baseline timing. But what you really want to be timing to is the maximum advance. So that's when it's advanced all the way open. And the reason for that is because these are quite cheap, they don't all advance in the same way. So you can't, you know, if I set this to top there, 10 degrees top dead center at idle, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be properly advanced when I'm at full RPM. So for the 009, what we need to do is set the timing when it's at its maximum advance, which is 30 degrees. And to do that, we're going to need to run the engine up to 3000 RPM. That's when it should be all the way advanced. And what I've got here is a proper timing light. It's quite a cheap one, but essentially it's just a very bright light that fires every time the signal goes to cylinder number 1. And we're going to need to make a special mark on the pulley that we can point the light at, and then every time the light flashes we'll see the mark, and then we can do the timing properly. The other thing we'll need is something to make sure that we're at 3000 RPM, and eagle-eyed viewers will have spotted that we don't have a rev gauge on this car. So I've got one of these. This is an automotive multimeter, and essentially the difference between this and a normal multimeter is got your dwell angle there, and you've also got attack here. So I can use this to see when we're at 3000 RPM, and then use the timing light to measure 30 degrees advance. But how do I know where 30 degrees is? Well, I'll show you how to do that just now. Now, if you've got a fancy timing light, you don't need to do this step, because the more expensive ones, you just dial 30 degrees in and it will fire. The light will fire when it's at top dead center here, so you can just use that as a timing mark. But I don't have one of those, so I'm gonna have to make my own mark. And I'm gonna use some trusty Tipex to do that. I'm sure other correcting fluids are available. And where do I need to make the mark? Because there's no degree markings on here. Well, I know because I've looked it up that it's 46.5 millimeters to the right of top dead center. So I'm going to measure that. So this isn't the most precise method of measuring, to be totally honest. I can just about see where that's going to be. So I made a bit of a mess of it. It's not, you know, going to be an exact science, this, but I'll be able to see roughly about where it's about right. Really, it should be an exact science, because, you know, you're dealing with quite precise measurements, but that's obviously not how we do things on this channel. Okay, so for this part of the job, I'm going to put the distributor cap back on, but I'm going to leave the nut loose because we're still going to be rotating it. Be careful because we're going to be rotating it whilst the engine's running, so keep your hands away from this because you don't want to get your hands caught up in there. And now I'm going to hook up the timing light. So the positive goes on the positive side, obviously, of the coil. You can get a good connection there. There we go. And naturally, your negative's going to go on your negative. There we are. And then I'm going to put this clip over the number 1 spark plug wire. There we are. So remember, number 1 is your sort of on the front right hand side. And I'm just going to route these wires, sort of get them out of the way a little bit, put them behind here. Don't get them tangled behind here, obviously, because that's where the fan is. But just get them out of the way here, just so it's away from this kind of stuff. And also because I'm going to set the tack up on this side. Okay, so the tack is very similar. Stick that on the negative side. And let's find an empty post that we can put on the positive side. So obviously, try and make sure you get a decent connection. You might be a little bit crowded on the posts, but just do what you can. Okay, so what you want to do is set this to the 4-cylinder tack times 10. And mine comes with a little stand, so I'm just going to stand it up here. And hopefully that will give me a good reading for my RPMs. So let's start the engine up and see how it works. Should have seen that coming, that would fall off. Right, let's turn this on. Yeah, so we're about 750, which is low for an idle, but we'll talk about setting the idle later. Yeah, we want it to read about 300 on there, so it is going to be quite loud. So we might need to get a spacer or something to hold the throttle open so we can keep the RPMs up. The idle's quite good though. 850 is about where you want it to be, so pretty happy with that. Right, so I don't know if you can see on the video, when I shine the timing light, you can see where the white timing mark is. Basically, when I run it up to full RPM, I want that white timing mark that's flashing up there to be at the split in the crankcase. So I'm going to run it up to 3000 now, and we'll see where it is, and we can see whether the ignition is basically too hot or needs moving. Let's see how we get on. Try and do it so you can actually see. That to me actually looks about spot on. So yeah, pretty happy with that. Again. looks good to me, so I'm going to shut it off.
To summarize the steps in timing an engine. 1. Be sure the engine is fully warm. 2. Check the dwell angle and adjust if necessary. 3. Adjust the idle speed. 4. Adjust timing if necessary by rotating the distributor after checking the workshop bulletin for the correct timing mark and vacuum hose information.
Okay, so now we know that our distributor is quite good because we've timed it statically to 10 degrees and checked it at 30 and it's about right. So what I've done is I've made another little mark here at the 10 degree mark. So that means now, next time I do the timing, I know I can just time it to 10 degrees because I've checked that it advances as it should. So yeah, we're good on that front. However, the annoying thing is that, as you heard, we still have a flat spot. So we're going to chase that down now. The next job is to get onto the carburetor. And we can do some tuning here, and I'll show you some of the sort of extra tips and tricks you can get to try and kind of get rid of that bog. Honestly, I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of it fully, just because it's a 009, even if it is, you know, seemingly quite a good one. So somewhere down the road, I am going to get a vacuum advance and stick that on there, and that should help it run a little bit better. So yeah, let's get on to some carb tuning. Okay, so I've got rid of the timing light, we don't need that anymore, but I've left the tack on there, and I'll show you why when we set the idle and so on. I thought first I'd just do a quick little clip just to show you kind of the different components of the carburetor and how it works on the VW. So you can see a few controls on this side. This is your throttle lever, and this here, this is your choke. So on the VW there's an automatic choke, and the way it works is essentially there's like a bimetallic spring which has got a wire that goes into the coil. So when you turn the key on, the spring heats up and the choke comes off slowly as the spring heats up, hopefully at the same rate that your engine heats up, and that's how you get automatic choke. It works pretty well. It's not great, obviously it's nowhere near as good as a modern car with electronic fuel injection and so on. It was pretty, you know, I guess it was pretty advanced for the time, and if you adjust it okay, then it, you know, it works all right, but it's not brilliant. This thing here, you can see this kind of steps cam. This is your essentially your fast idle. So first thing you do when you go to start the car in the morning, you press down on the throttle and that opens up the choke, and you can see this cam springs down as well, and that holds the throttle open. It should be on the top one really. Obviously I've just been running the car, so it's a little bit warm, and what that essentially holds the throttle open so you get a faster idle, and then the car warm up. And this little bit here, that's what controls the actual choke, so you can see it's not fully on at the moment. Your other controls, so when you're actually setting or tuning the carb, on this particular carburetor, there are a few different designs of carburetor. These are the two controls you use, and this is typical for most of the VWs from this era, to be honest. Essentially this big one here, this is what you use to set the idle speed, and this little one, that's what you use to set the mixture, and obviously I'll show you shortly exactly how you do that. And some of the older ones, this screw here was how you set the idle speed, because basically when you screw this in and out, it opens and closes the throttle. So if you've got like an early 60s bug, that's probably how you do it. The mistake a lot of people make is thinking it's the same principle on here. It isn't. It's not designed to work that way on these later carbs. So essentially the way you want it is so that when the choke's fully open, like that, you've got a little bit of a gap between this screw and the cam here, which we have. So that's set up about right, just so that it can spring open properly. So in order to do this, the engine needs to be warm. So it's warmed up a little bit, but we're going to run it for a little bit just to let it warm up a bit more. Screw that back on. Just while I'm here, if you see me grab the dipstick there, obviously VWs don't have a temperature gauge because there's no water, and they didn't come with an oil temperature gauge or anything like that. You can add one if you want. It's quite a useful thing. But a nice little trick is, if you want to know if your VW is hot or not, is just to grab the dipstick, obviously when the engine's not running. If it's too hot, then you're overheating. Normal operating temperature will be that it's just hot enough so you can grab it without burning your hand. Mine's obviously nowhere near hot yet. I can feel some heat, but because I can just grab it willy-nilly, it still needs to warm up. Truth be told, when it's sat here idling, it's not going to warm up that brilliantly. But we'll do what we can. So I'm just going to run the engine for a bit and let it warm up, and then I'll join you when it's time to do the ignition. I'll join you when it's time to set the carb. Right, so I'm going to have the engine off for this first part. Basically, first thing you need to do is get a small flat bladed screwdriver, and we're going to screw in the mixture control. I'm going to try and do this without getting my head in your way, as per usual. Okay, so we're going to screw this in until it bottoms out, and you want to do this very, very carefully. This screw is made from, well, it's a jet, basically, that you're moving in and out. It's made from brass, so if you screw it in too tightly, you're going to bend, you're going to ruin it, and then you'll never be able to set your mixture properly. So just very gently turn it in until it stops, and do not try and force it in any further. What I want to do is screw it out again, 2.5 turns. Okay, and that's 2.5. So that's the kind of mixture, kind of at its baseline setting. Okay, that was idling. You want it so the choke's off fully. And as I say, the idle speed was between 850 and 900 RPM. Now I tend to go on the higher side, towards 900. Reason for that is basically the faster the engine's spinning, the faster the idle is. The faster the engine's spinning, the faster the fan's spinning, and the fan is where you get all your cooling. You think you've just come off, well, perhaps not a motorway, but you've been cruising along, the engine's working hard, it's getting quite hot, and then you suddenly come to a set of traffic lights, it's idling and the fan's not running very quickly, you're not getting as much air over the cylinders, so it starts to heat up quite quickly. So I tend to set the idler a little bit higher. And the way you do that is just by essentially loosening this screw here. Okay, my fat head's probably in the way. So just to demonstrate, you can hear as I loosen this screw, I don't know how well you can hear that, but you can hear that the engine's starting to speed up a bit. You can see it's gone up there as well. So that's obviously too fast now, that's about 1,000. So it doesn't need to be that high, all you're really doing there is wasting fuel. So screw it back in. Okay, so that's about right. I'm going to go in a little bit just because This engine's not fully warm, I don't think. When it warms up, you can expect the idle to come up a little bit. So I'm going to go in just there we go, so we're between 850 and 900 now. Still coming up a bit. Probably just as warming up a tiny bit. That's about right, I'd say. It's not going to be exact. I mean, this isn't a particularly great multimeter anyway, so it's never going to be exact. So what we need to do now that we're at the right kind of idle speed, is play with the mixture to get the most smooth running possible. So we'll do that now. Get your small screwdriver. Firstly, I'm going to unscrew it and see what that does to the idle. Okay, it sounds like it's starting to come down, it's starting to skip a little bit. You kind of have to use your ears here a bit, really. See, that's skipping now. So I'm going to go back in. Starting to speed up a bit now. Starting to smooth out. And now it's starting to die down a little bit again. So I'm going to go back out. Basically what you want to do now is adjust this so you get kind of the smoothest, highest idle. Now I like to go a little bit on the richer side, so it's screwed out a little bit. Basically these engines don't like to run lean. Really you want as much fuel in as possible. It helps with the cooling as well. The more fuel you have in the cylinders, the cooler it'll run. If you run these lean, they'll overheat pretty quickly. They don't like it. So that sounds pretty smooth. I'm just basically going to unscrew it until it starts to go down again. Now it's starting to die again now, so I'll screw it back in a bit. I'm just trying to find the smoothest bit, really. I reckon about there's a sweet spot. But you'll see the idles come up a bit high now. So I'm going to adjust that again. There we go. I'd say that's there, yeah. That's pretty much exactly where we want to be right now. So let's see what that's done to our flat spot. It's still there. And it settles back down again. Again, it's still a tiny bit high, but I'd rather it be too high than too low. Okay, so you can hear there's still a flat spot. It's not as pronounced, we got rid of it a little bit.
The important thing is what you know about every Volkswagen that rolls in for checkup or repair. And you have to know the system. The Volkswagen carburetor system.
because the idle speed adjustment you make is the key to the efficiency of the system you control.
So yeah, I think that's just about it for engine stuff. Obviously the next step would be, ideally, to take it for a road test, and then we can actually get a better idea of how it's performing. But obviously we can't really do that at the moment. Yeah, once again, thanks for tuning in, guys. This week was perhaps not such a major week, just some more sort of fiddly things, but I quite enjoy the tune-up stuff, so I hope you enjoyed it too. Let me know if you did, leave me a comment. Yeah, once again, if you like Beetle stuff, you like VW stuff, hit subscribe. I've got lots more coming. Hit the like button, because that does help me out. And yeah, thanks again. Cheers then, guys. See you next week.